Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Winner's Circle yet again, where we relive the iconic moments of the 2023 Disc Golf Pro Tour season with the players that make those moments happen. We're joined here now by Sai Ananda. Sai, we're going to take it back to the Texas swing and relive that wonderful victory at the Texas States. But first off, Sai, thank you so much for your time. How's the off season been?
Oh, it's been so lovely. Just spending time with my cats, spending time with my boyfriend, and catching up on a lot of art projects that I have written down ideas for.
Well, you've been involved in disc golf for a long time, but you took the scene by storm, especially at this tournament. You've been playing at a high level for a while, but what about this week in Texas felt special? Maybe in your practice rounds, was something feeling particularly good?
You know, I some people are kind of superstitious or serendipitous or believe that things align in a certain way, and I've honestly tried to rack my brain of what was it? Was I in the flow more than I wasn't? Or I was trying to find something tangible that set that week apart. And it's
Hmm.
so, especially with how busy it was at the time, too, so long ago, and just being in Texas was super busy. It's so difficult to find something tangible. A lot of people are like, oh, I'll wear the same pair of socks or something like that, where you get the superstition. But it's so tricky how
Hmm.
many things have to align that are so much out of my control that kind of just allowed for that to
Hmm.
happen. And then I just kind of, they say, well, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So
Hmm.
luckily I was prepared for the opportunity when the timing came around, I think.
Well, and the course was so challenging, but what I loved about it was the fact that it was a separate FPO course. It was 18 holes of FPO specific design. I felt like the course scored really well. It was such an exciting final day. Let's throw it straight to the action now and tee off on hole one during this final round. Just a great starting hole, just a simple stock par four to kind of ease you into the course.
Yeah, and I really decided that I didn't want any funny business with my second shot. I obviously probably could have decided to go for more distance off of the tee, but it just didn't seem worth it, especially I didn't have a very good forehand for that approach and
Hmm.
the rest of my card. So I decided, hole one, execute a good strategy and just kind of take it easy. This course is really really fun to play. And I guess maybe one of the factors I could think that contributed to my success is the fact that it's a really flat course,
Hmm.
and that's very similar to shout out if anybody recognizes a downriver or a high bridge, which are kind of park courses where there's not a lot of elevation except for one or two holes perhaps. So you're navigating lines in a linear way rather than having to mess with all of these angles up and
Hmm.
down. And I love that kind of golf. So you could that does play to some of my strengths, I think.
Do you do a lot of just raw field work when you're practicing for tournaments?
Yeah, I used to
Hmm.
earlier on when I just absolutely had the stoke for disc golf in the first 5 years that I was playing. I was out in the field 5 days a week basically, as well as playing on the course multiple days a week. But now that I'm playing more consistently, and now that I have been playing for 10 years now, those years have kind of added up, and my body feels it when I play more than 2 rounds in a day.
Definitely.
So honestly, I really try to moderate my field work, and I'm always really interested in sports psychology and just the difference that visualization and mental engagement can have on the same physical practice. You could do 10 reps no mental engagement and 10 reps mental engagement, and the mental engagement is going to be so much more of a profound shift in your expertise in whatever skill you're trying to do. So I actually visualize a lot, and I imagine holes on courses or specific throws, or I'll even try to put myself in a tournament setting where I'm on hole two of a specific course, and I'm like,
Hmm.
ooh, I really want it nose up, and just visualize very small details about the throw. And that seems to be a lot of where my practice is,
Hmm.
rather than hitting the field every day. I guess a tangible answer was I'm probably, I haven't done field work in a while, but usually it's about once or twice a week.
Hmm.
And then I'm usually hitting the disc golf course anywhere between like, twice or 4 times a week, if the weather permits it.
You mentioned that you're really into sports psychology, and I actually noticed early on in just interviews when you started to do more of them, I noticed that you were into sports psychology. Are you a reader? Are you a podcast listener? Are there any places that you ingest content in regards to sports psychology?
Podcasts are definitely the easiest way for me to digest. I love sitting down and reading, but I can never sit down for like a long enough duration to actually
Hmm.
feel like I'm absorbing a lot. So I really love to put in a good podcast while I'm doing something kind of like meditative or, mundane at work and stuff like that. And that's a really, really awesome way to like intake information. And then sometimes I'll even like, if it's a particularly good episode, I'll go back and like take notes on it and like listen to it again
Yes.
and like, all right, this was kind of a golden piece I want to dig into a little bit more.
Do you feel like there's something that's clicked for you as an athlete in the sports psychology realm over the past couple of years that have led to this success?
Yeah, there's definitely like as an athlete, I've realized, especially like competing in tournaments too, sometimes you just have to find a fix for that day. It may not be the fix for the rest of your season, but sometimes you just kind of got to get by. You got to get through
Hmm.
the round and you got to figure out what's going to make you confident in that moment. So I've definitely had a lot of different things at different times, but one consistent like tool that I have used in different forms is breath work. And it's
Yes.
become a lot more popular in a lot of different athletes in this sport, but it's just super duper invaluable. Um, Super duper is a very technical term,
Yes,
um,
of course.
but the more, and I'm not very regimented and I'm not very strict, but the more I notice that I'm consistent with my breath work in my practice and also in my relaxation time too. So the more broadly and the more consistently you can key into your breath and associate your breath with like what you're doing or like your particular activities, it's just been so grounding and so helpful and just kind of like, I guess I'm a nerd and I like to learn about the mechanics.
Yes,
It helps calm my anxiety, when I'm like, okay, I know physiologically there are mechanisms in my brain that when I take this breath, my heart rate is going to slow down. And it may not
absolutely.
slow down to the point where I'm like feeling good, but it's going to slow down by a few beats per minute, 3 or 4, and at least like give you some sense of like the reins rather
Hmm.
than like, oh no, my emotional state has gotten flared and I'm not certain what I can do to kind of bring bring the ship kind of, back into control a little bit.
Definitely.
And yeah, just breath work, and there's so many different types too for different individuals, like whatever you can do, box breathing or like any kind of small integration that fits into your lifestyle that you can like build upon as you get older, absolutely phenomenal. And I'd recommend looking into it for, anyone who maybe deals with, tournament nerves or anxiety or someone who's just looking to potentially perform a little bit better. It's
Definitely.
really helpful.
Yeah, I feel like especially when you're on tour, failure happens more time than the success, it feels like at times. So there's so many things you have to kind of wrestle with, especially, living the road lifestyle, which is not puppies and rainbows, so to speak, to use a technical term. But I feel like it's nice to just know that you have tools to fall back on when things aren't going the way that they're supposed to go, or at least in your
Yeah,
mind that they're supposed to go.
right. And well, and it's always something like you're working on. I'm sure we've all had moments where it's like, oh, I found this tool that's been so helpful, and the past couple of tournaments have been awesome. And then you play your, fourth tournament in a row, and all of a sudden your tool's not helping, and you're like,
Hmm.
oh, what happened? And it's because you change. It's because your circumstances change, and so it's always about like
Correct.
little minute adjustments of like just leaning in the direction that you want to go. Maybe not full on sprinting the direction that you want to go, but at
Yeah.
least making sure you've got a steady pace towards the right direction a little bit.
I do have a question for you. I mean, as we're getting into finishing the second hole here, what emotions are you feeling? How present did you feel at this point in the day?
It was so awesome. Like I can probably like count on two hands moments or extended periods of time where I feel like I felt present. I don't know if that's something that other people experience more often than not, and especially as someone who kind of, my brain was wired a little bit differently. I've got a little bit of ADHD, and like, I'm a little bit different the way I'm wired, and so it's just oh dang it, I lost my train of thought. Speaking of being
Well,
wired
I
differently.
understand what you're saying, Sai, and as you think of that thought, I think a lot of players all say the same thing, but in a little bit different way. You know, whenever they have the round of their life, they usually say, I felt nothing. I felt like I didn't feel nerves. I didn't feel overjoyed. I didn't feel too stressed. Um, you're just
Or I
completely
felt like
tapped
I could
in.
have done better, even, is what I hear
Exactly.
from a lot of interviews.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think the whole goal is to tap into that, whatever state that is, for as long as you possibly can. But it almost feels like it has a mind of its own.
it's it is so interesting how it does feel like it's a current that you could tap into, not a
Hmm.
current that arrives to you in any kind of way. And then I guess I think to touch back on where I left off a little bit
Hmm.
was I felt really like focused and engaged in a really like pleasant way. It felt like I was playing. I felt like I
Hmm.
was playing a game, which is what it is. And
Yeah.
every time, and just her own was a really fun part of the experience too. She was
Yes.
such a joy. She'd be like humming a little song, and I'd be like, "What are you singing, Owen?" And she's like, "Oh, Justin Bieber." And she's like listening to pop hits and stuff like that. And so that's the environment, Owen
Hmm.
singing Justin Bieber songs, and
Yeah.
then I'm just laying out the best putts of my life and like high fiving my putting hero, it's just like so crazy and
I.
so fun to feel like that engaged. Like every time I was walking up to a tee pad, it wasn't that was so crucial, but it wasn't like I was like I knew what disc I was going to throw.
Hmm.
It's like sometimes you walk up to a hole and you don't want to think about it, and you're like, oh, this one. And sometimes I feel like you can be a little bit automatic when you can think that way,
Hmm.
and you fail to engage with the moment. So if you have a disc that you want to throw on that hole, and you're like, boom, so focused on it, you may forget to notice the wind direction has changed,
Exactly.
or certain factors have changed. So every time I walked up to a tee pad, I had multiple discs in my hand, or I had like, okay, if this isn't right for this one, then I'm going to have a plan B. And I had like two or three different options that I was like actively engaged in, and
Hmm.
just really paying attention to like the wind and like the environment, and like it was so cool.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. Like, ideally, you want a game plan during your practice days, but you can't necessarily do that. You still have to be adaptive and confident in the adaptation that you make. Uh, we're seeing Kristen not fresh to start this day. She's made a couple of routine mistakes. Are you paying attention to her or anybody on the card, how they're playing?
I definitely was paying attention to Kristen. It was hard not to, honestly. I
Hmm.
really I tried to kind of let their game be their game, especially with how tight it was. I mean, like when you looked at the percentages on UDisc, it was like 99, 98, 98,
Yeah,
97% chance. Like it was anyone's game, and everyone had the skill set to take it clearly. But it was hard when she had an amazing it was hard just not to key in on her throws or
of
her
course.
putts, or when she had an exceptional approach shot, I was like, oh, all right,
What?
because I feel like I couldn't completely disengage from her. I don't know, I feel like it's something I've done before, where I feel like sometimes you can like latch on to a player
Hmm.
and like that's your competition instead of the whole card. And I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that feeling, but I feel like I've kind of done it before. And sometimes it can be in the wrong direction where you latch onto a player and you think that's your competition, and then they end up tanking and you end up tanking. And so you can kind of, it goes back to being engaged and, being modular in your strategies and stuff
Hmm.
like that. But I couldn't completely let go of my focus of her because I felt like she was right there with me.
Of
Like,
course.
if we were on a foot race, we would be, in our each other's peripheral vision,
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah, and it seems like
But it was in a good way, I think.
exactly. Yeah, it seems like for her, especially this season, whenever she starts two, three holes not so great, it seems like she always seems to snap back and is the front runner. So you're always having to pay attention to what she's doing. But at this point, it looks like you can do no wrong. Like the disc is just coming out of your hand perfect right now.
Yes, that was kind of crazy too. Like, especially the weekends leading up to it, like, weren't super hot weekends. Like,
Hmm.
there wasn't a lot of obvious like signs saying you are hot this weekend and you roll with it. So I don't know, like, yeah, what kind of little current that I tapped into and was able to like doggy paddle and somehow like keep up with the flow of everyone and all of these amazing players was just like super duper crazy. And not only was I like engaged with Kristen, I felt like in a good round of disc golf, you are engaged to a limit and to a degree with your other players.
Hmm.
So you can root for them, or, it's a gentleman's game. Know when to give somebody a high five. Know when
Exactly.
to, ooh, I'm gonna give you a second and let you calm down for a moment after that putt. And so it was, everybody was like, oh, six shot, and everybody was so like, it's like that round was the only thing that was going on in the whole world. It was just
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
four of us like on the
Yep.
disc golf course, and that was all we could think about. It's like, oh, sweet shot, way to execute that one. Or I think there's even a couple of videos of like me and Owen looking at four leaf clovers. Like it was such a pleasant moment in time and space, to be a part of with those people.
So here's what I'm experiencing as I'm watching you all go through this. I felt not only that energy amongst you and Owen and everybody who was kind of tapped in on that card. Nate Perkins was on the ground and he was finding all sorts of wildlife out there. There was a time when he found um, what is it called? It was like a black-footed some sort of bird, and he also
Yeah,
identified a turtle. And then they were on a log together, like hanging out together. And then
yeah.
yeah, it was unbelievable. Talk about just the nature out there in Houston.
There was I mean, there were dogs all over, like stray dogs everywhere as you like
Hmm.
around the course. And then once you got into the course, there was like this little pond, and like you said, the turtles. I think there's a picture of me and I'm like, oh, like pointing and like looking over, and it's because I'm looking at the camera guy and I'm telling him to go look at this log where there's 8 turtles lined up
Yes.
in a row. Like,
So
so
it
amazing.
was those turtles, and then Perkins chimes in and goes, "I found the black-bellied whistling duck." And then they found the duck on the log with all those turtles. It was one of the best B-roll shots of the entire year. And also, I heard a rumor that someone found an alligator snapping turtle on the course, which is like those really dinosaur-looking snapping turtles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Sixteen's Creek. If you go down the hill, apparently Perkins saw one down there.
Oh, I missed out on that one. Yeah,
Terrifying
there's
animal.
like a large chunk of like my reel in my phone, of like just greenery from that disc golf course, essentially.
Yeah, I was kind
This
of blown
hole is
away.
so much fun.
Yes.
I mean, kind of a nightmare, but like, and this is a hole where I walked up with two discs in my hand. And I remember my dad commenting, and he was like, I saw the two discs in your hand, and I definitely was wondering what was going through your head. And I walk up, and I have a BT medium harp or a biofusion enforcer. So I'm either gonna harp down the middle, kind of like I did, or if the wind was right to left, I was able to throw the enforcer and it like would scoop up under the basket. So
That's a
just
cool
another
shot.
hole where I felt like I was paying attention to the conditions, I was paying attention to the hole,
Hmm.
and I was also like paying attention to myself too. Of like, am I feeling like I want to go for that dead center line, or am I feeling like I want to play it a little safer? And the confidence I felt was, I don't want to say it was unusual. I mean, maybe I look it, but I don't always feel like the most confident
Hmm.
person. But in this round, I felt certain of what I could accomplish, and that's a
Yeah.
really cool feeling to have as a human in general, and as an athlete who has like practiced something to a degree that they have like a certain level of
Of
expertise.
course.
To feel confident in your, in your field,
Hmm.
that was like such a huge moment in my career.
I feel like having that confidence you're talking about, especially when any decision sounds fine, it is the reason why we love disc golf so much. Sometimes it feels like you kind of have to lean on a specific disc or a specific line that's working for you. But when you can go straight, you can go high, you can go turnover, you can go hyzer. That's when it's super enjoyable to play. It's just coming down to
Yeah.
decision making.
Yes, exactly. And for me, when I've had those rounds where I like rely on one disc, or I'm like,
Hmm.
I find the one disc that's really working for me, I feel like that decision is usually motivated from a place of anxiety, of
Yep.
like, oh, I'm not certain what's working for me, so I'm just going to kind of stick to this one disc. And
Hmm.
that can be a good strategy if you feel like things are, beyond your control. Sometimes you really do just need to like get out of the course, just get off the course, just salvage the round and get out of there,
Swim
man.
sideways. Yeah.
Right? Like go take a nap, go eat dinner, just freaking reset. But sometimes I think you really have to, especially with the level of play, and how capable and skilled athletes are,
Hmm.
you really, at least I think, you have to watch when you are making decisions based on confidence and when you're making decisions based on fear or
Hmm.
anxiety or, etc. Whatever feeling or, present state may be motivating. I think it's super valuable to key in and pay attention to that.
That is a really, really good point. We make decisions no matter what, but
Yeah,
sometimes it feels like we're trapped into making a specific decision. But like you said early on, you've put the work in for years. Like you know what shots you can throw, you know what shots you can throw well. It's a dream to just be able to pick like you're playing a video game and just do whatever you want to do out there.
right. And like, as someone who certainly has an inner critic for sure, and
Hmm.
I've actually learned that not everyone does. Not every human has an internal like dialogue or a like an internal voice, which is super
Hmm.
fascinating to me. But that can be challenging on a day-to-day
Hmm.
basis when when you struggle with intrusive thoughts and like doubting yourself, especially as someone who has trained and is like skilled. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, what are you doubting yourself for? You put in the work for it. So
Yeah.
to have a round where you're absolutely able to just take the hand to that voice that tells you, oh, maybe you wouldn't be able to do that, or like, ooh, what if you miss that putt, or what if this putt doesn't go in, and like all the bad things happen, or whatever
Hmm.
your internal negative dialogue could possibly be,
Hmm.
to feel like you just gave it the hand and it has no like control over your objective reality.
Hmm.
That's an amazing experience, and
Yes.
to have had it like on camera in a competitive setting, like that's pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
I did have a question, to settle into the physical side of the game right now. I mean, we could probably talk mental all day, it sounds like, but I feel like for me, every time I've shot a round that is like, best round of my life, it always felt like there was a few discs in my bag that were so perfectly tuned in and dialed and beat into perfection that I could use them as a joystick, and it sparked so much confidence. What were the discs that worked for you this week? What was the joystick in your bag?
The disc that I threw on hole one, it was one of the Waisaki Orbit Felons, and that, especially with like the flat ground
Hmm.
and needing to maneuver left to right angles, it was super awesome to have that disc that's like not super fast. I don't always like, 13 speeds that are super overstable,
Hmm.
but to have a lower speed disc that allowed me to like maneuver flex shots and I could just trust it. You put it on an anhyzer, and it's
Hmm.
amazing that you can trust a disc to not, have an anhyzer finish. So the Felon was super awesome. And I mean, my classic Wardens that I was putting with obviously definitely felt like a joystick there, except
Hmm.
for, of course, that last little one, but
Yeah.
such an amazing, like, section of time where I was putting really good, and it coincidentally happened to have been at these
Hmm.
tournaments.
Yeah.
We always have like, during the off season, you were just putting absolute lights out, and then once tournament time comes, where did my putts go? So
Yeah.
to have all of those putts go in within that time frame during a tournament, super duper crazy.
I mean, they were coming out of your hand looking the most physically competent of anyone on the card. It looked like you were dictating the entire flight of the putt. It was pretty incredible to watch.
It was a lot of trust. I remember like thinking back, and a lot of like the words that I was trying to use to like reassure myself on the putts, because every single one certainly was nerve wracking. Every time I stepped up to the tee pad, you can you can feel the weight of the atmosphere. You
Hmm.
can, but you can kind of take it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
I like the funneling nature of this fairway. I also like there's OB on both sides, but it's generous here. You can finally let
Yeah,
a disc kind of ride a little bit.
the trees come into play a lot
Hmm.
more than the OB really did. I think the OB was nice to manage it. I don't know what it was about this hole, but the angles on this one were so challenging. You feel like you could just throw it straight down the
Hmm.
tunnel, but a lot of the times that's like I would end up a little bit too far to the right, or Ohm is in a really classic landing zone of just kind of like flexing something and ending up to the left. But it just felt like I wanted to throw something really, really straight down this fairway to get like at least a couple trees ahead. Oh, so beautiful.
Owen has blown me away for the past couple of seasons. You called her your putting hero. I love the fact that yes, she's known for the chop sidearm. Yes, she's known for the putting, but she still doesn't stop working on the backhand distance. And like after all these years, is just still grinding away. I mean, we saw her final nine at the 2014 Worlds. I think a lot of people forget about that.
Yeah, she absolutely has a really great idea of her strengths and her weaknesses. And she does a really good job of strategizing and playing to her strengths, which is that sidearm and that putt, and is humble enough to work on the weaknesses and to really put in the time and effort and not just kind of ride on some of the natural skill and talent that,
Hmm.
we can find as we're, good at disc golf.
Yeah. I mean, we're on hole seven, and Kristen's missed weak side, quite a few times. Are you are you making any mental notes of this at all? Are you saying like, okay, time to put the pedal to the metal and make sure she can't catch me, or are you still just kind of locked in?
Oh my gosh, the pedal is to the metal. It is already all the way down to the ground. I can't floor it any harder. All I have to do is like hope my seatbelt is on and hope that I can like hope that we run out of holes, honestly. Like, because I mean, she's feeling it. I'm feeling it. Owen's feeling it. I mean,
Mhm.
you saw on the last couple of holes, I mean, Holland is obviously feeling it. We're all right there feeling like the weight of it kind of pressed down, and we're all trying to trust our stuff.
Mhm.
As Seth says, we're trying to trust all the work that we've put into. Oh, so interesting. I did a really good job. Ooh, little bit of a weird. I went too fast picking up the mini there, but I think I did a really good job. Yeah,
I
Just
mean,
that was fine.
couple of weak misses, weak side miss,
Yeah.
three putt. Are you feeling nervous at all after those? Are you just,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh. Like all the way up to my head, like I don't
whoa.
know if you could see, but I was probably flush. I was like, that was so, such a big emotion. And I
Hmm.
think what I had to do was just like, okay, 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 all that big emotion, we're gonna sit you down right there. 1 second. We gotta finish the round really quick. And
Yeah.
I just had to like put it in a little envelope and say like, all right, if if you let that get to you, then that's it. I mean, to put it plain and simple,
Yeah.
and I know that a lot of people watching, that's exactly what they were thinking. Oh
Hmm.
my gosh, is this it? She made it this far. Is she gonna slip? And everybody's just thinking like, oh, does she have the stuff? Does she have the stuff? Can she
Hmm.
do it? And I'm thinking the exact same thing, y'all. I don't know if I have the stuff. Like I am I'm placing my bet on this on me,
Yeah.
and I'm not certain, how it's gonna go.
And
This
throughout
hole
the
was really,
entire
really fun.
time,
Go
the
ahead.
rain is falling down.
Yeah,
It,
it
so
was
there's also
actually
that.
you can kind of see it was actually kind of misty rather than like falling down. It almost felt like just like 99.99% humidity. As you would walk, the
Mhm.
mist would kind of like hit your cheeks and you would be a little bit wet. But if you stood still, you couldn't really feel the raindrops. So it
Weird.
was kind of a, yeah, it was a pretty misty, um, definitely definitely lends itself to the kind of enchanting energy that I think that course had that you
Look,
kind of mentioned with the animals
I
and
know.
everything.
Look at that tee shot. That is absolutely smoked.
That's totally what I was gonna say when at the beginning of the hole. Like I was so proud of like absolutely punching that drive down there. That was my Biofusion Enforcer, super stable disc, and absolutely had to trust in my speed and my power to put it on an anhyzer and know exactly when it was going to finish and come out of the turn. But the second shot on this one is super duper huge.
I mean, just in general, this hole is probably, at least from what I saw, one of the more challenging holes in the course.
Yeah, where Kristen ended up, very, very common landing zone. You're trying to hyzer it in, but those branches just catch you so easily. And I'm pretty sure I ended up there at one of the two prior rounds.
Little
Rusty
chippy harp,
blowhard.
and
See,
that.
and that's where I was like, that was a carry from the putt. That was me like still trying to process that like flush of emotions that the missed hole came. Like my heart was still kind of racing and I was like physiologically still trying to like find control again. And still in my mind, I'm not certain of victory. I
Hmm.
mean, and looking at scores after the front nine, I probably could have chilled out. Probably could have not stressed quite as much as I was stressing. But like when you have Kristen Tatar and she is like right
Of
behind
course,
you,
every time.
so it was like in these moments, I'm like, I can remember thinking like you kind of got to keep it together, like even that was so scary. Like that was just nerve wracking. And so now all of the pressure is on that putt to
Yeah, like
like
a 15, 20
hold it
footer.
together. Like there was so much subliminal, there was so much pressure under the radar at any given moment.
Hmm.
Huge, huge. Oh my gosh. Like in my heart, that was such a gigantic putt. That was like me recovering from those two missed putts. Even though it was a hole later, that's kind of how things felt in my like internal timeline a little bit.
I feel like if that putt did not go in, that's that could be enough to take you out of the flow state completely. I
Yeah,
mean, I still
huge
think
momentum shift.
one hole you can snap back in, no problem. But if you have a couple in a row, it's really tough to like be in your body and not be thinking about like what's going to happen, what's Kristen doing, what's Owen
Yeah.
doing.
I've gotten really into I mean, I've been practicing like bouldering and stuff like that, but I've
Oh,
gotten really
nice.
into watching rock climbing, and especially free solo rock
Mm-hmm.
climbing, which is an absolute trip. Just a human on the top of a mountain with nothing but their skills and expertise. And there are moments when their holds are sketchy. There are
Mm-hmm.
moments where they grab onto a hold and it like falls away. Oh, sorry. I got crazy puppies in this house.
No worries.
But there are moments when a rock climber feels the same feeling that I felt when I missed that putt, but they can't afford to slip because it's their life.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want to make disc golf, life or death stressful, but
Mhm.
I use that as like perspective of like my
Yes.
life isn't at risk here. I'm not on the side of a cliff, and I try to use again that knowledge, to help give me perspective a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. That was interesting. I was sticking to my game plan and still running the birdie, even though that was a little bit long and a little bit out of position. So I think that's me trying to give a little bit of a fight back,
Mm-hmm.
trying not to show like complete submission
Of
in
course.
missing that putt and show like, yeah, I did miss that putt. And
Yeah.
I'm going to keep pushing and I am going to keep my commitment for every single freaking throw. That was such a huge battle in that moment right there, and it definitely felt like things like in rock climbing, that's what they would call the crux or the
Yes.
most difficult part of the route, and that definitely felt like my crux. If you can make it through that, then you're kind of on the rest of your ascent towards finishing your climb. So it definitely felt like
Yeah.
things opened up as I like persevered through that.
It's so interesting that you just brought up free soloing because I talk about what Alex Honnold did in that movie Free Solo all the time because, like you said, they are forced into a state of flow. Because if you think of anything else and you're not perfectly focused, you literally lose your life. So
Yeah.
failure cannot happen. Anyone who free solos and is still alive is 100%. And
Yeah.
it's like you wonder how can you tap into that in a sport where your brain doesn't force you into that state? How can you
Right. And
manually
that's
tap
a
into that?
that's a really good question, Brian, because I think they use rock climbing to get to that state, but that is a state that we have access to even when
Hmm.
we're not on a cliff.
Correct.
I mean, not to sound too, heady and esoteric, but I do believe in the power of the mind,
Hmm.
but it's also amazing how I don't want to say weak, but vulnerable maybe
Fickle.
the mind can be at the exact same time.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And that's why it's so funny. We're playing. At the end of the day, back when it first started, it was literally frisbee golf. And why do we feel such big emotions doing something like this? And it's
I
just
know, right?
yeah, it's a constant perspective shift, just like trying to get yourself into a place where you're not afraid to perform. But when the stakes are high, when you put your whole heart into something, it's kind of a paradox to care, but also not care at the same time.
Yes, and I have definitely commented on the at least emotionally the paradoxical nature of disc golf because you do see the top pros and no expressions on their face. If you do see it, especially in MPO, if you see an emotional flare up, you're like, whoa,
Hmm.
that really got to him.
Hmm.
Like, whoa, he leaked. He let it out.
He
Kind of.
leaked.
That's a phrase I like to use.
Yeah.
A little spring a leak kind of comes out. It's a
Uh-huh.
funny imagery, but it's this hole in particular. I just totally off subject, but this hole is so weird, so random with that mound and stuff like that. But I mean, it's the challenge for every disc golfer because it means so much to us. We're all out on the road and we're all
Hmm.
pursuing our passion that we share. And you see it. You see the slapped knees, you see the curled up minis of like frustration, and you see when people let out their feelings and their heart and their soul. And
Hmm.
it's the challenge for every artist
Hmm.
to perform at a time, at a date, at a specific place, at an occasion, not just kind of an artist who does art in their basement and can pull out a really nice sculpture every now and again. And it may be they're a really, really good artist, but can they perform with deadlines? Can they perform with, different input, working with different people? And it's it's the challenge to turn something you're passionate about into a profession.
Hmm.
Profession, no emotion.
Absolutely.
Passion, all emotion.
How has that been for you? How has that transition been, turning your passion into your job? Is it tough sometimes?
Yeah, it has been. And I think I'm a pretty passionate person. When I feel joy, I feel it, to the nth degree. And when I feel sadness, I definitely, fall all the way down into sadness. So when I feel the elations and joy that disc golf has to offer, that's what, the smile on Kristen's face right now,
Yeah.
that's that's what keeps me coming back. But it's it's tough when you have rounds that don't bring those smiles to your face, and like it makes you question, you
Uh-huh.
have all of this passion, you believe in yourself, you've gotten a sponsor, you've put in the time, you've put in the dedication, you've worked on your fitness, you've worked on your mental game,
Hmm.
and then you have rounds that are genuinely very disheartening, or
Yeah.
even holes, that just can break you to a
Hmm.
certain degree. And I think it's that process of it's an old analogy, but it's like clay. It's like being on the wheel and coming down and coming up and coming down and coming up. And it's that process of questioning it and
Hmm.
then answering it. Of like, oh man, what am I doing? Why am like, is this something that I need to be doing? And then the next week, heck yes, this is something
Yeah.
I need to be doing,
Yes.
And it may not be an immediate answer, but those are really important questions to ask. And when you get the answers,
Hmm.
that kind of shows you your path every time
Hmm.
as it unfolds, one step ahead of you.
One of my questions I asked myself when I first hit the road was, if I won the lottery, would I still be here? Would I still be doing this thing? And the answer was yes. And I think if you can answer that question at least somewhat, maybe you'd be touring in a little bit bigger RV or something like that. If that's your answer, then you are in the right place, and it's as easy as that. But I think golf in general is hard. It's like you fail so many more times than you don't fail, and you lose a lot more than you win. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even in this season where
Statistically.
Kristen literally won more tournaments than anybody by far, and there were still more FPO winners than has ever happened in the past. So it's like she's still lost that many times. So yeah, I think once you accept that just the concept of golf is based on failure, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of cope with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, tour life's hard. That's for sure.
Well, and I guess, success typically lies beyond failure,
Hmm.
typically beyond that curtain that we push through is usually right where success is. And
Hmm.
I think it's particularly an interesting choice in, yeah, magic. There you go.
I had to mute
And I think,
myself during this because you actually made me almost spit out my water. Just
oh
I t-
man, won the hearts of millions just being an absolute goober. But it is an interesting, when you choose sports, when you choose athletics, when you
Mhm.
choose to use your body, which,
Yeah.
as we know, doesn't last forever
Hmm.
and doesn't remain in one singular state, for very long
Hmm.
even. So it's always an interesting, back and forth between your mind and body, at least from my perspective. I don't know if I can speak for other athletes, but your body is always asking your mind, what can we do to make this more efficient? What can we do to
Mm-hmm.
make this easier? And then your mind is always asking your body, like, are you good? Can you do this? Do you need rehabilitation? Do you need some assistance? Do you need
Mm-hmm.
rest? So it's this back and forth between your mind and your body as you just kind of use your body like a tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's super duper interesting rather than, I guess the opposite would be someone, sitting stationary
Your
at a
brain.
desk all day, but doing, you know, complex, accounting and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, just letting their mind go.
Yeah, their mind or their mouth or yeah, something else rather than their joints and
Right?
and yeah,
Well, and like, I don't know if I've had this thought before, but as I'm speaking, I'm realizing your body's going to deteriorate either way. Even if you are sitting at a desk stationary and taking good care of your body, you are
yeah.
still going to deteriorate. So
Mm-hmm.
you might as well see what this amazing mecha can do for you.
Of course. Of course. We're still
I
just
don't
on
know.
hole 12,
I
but
know.
I can't even imagine you're telling me on hole 7 that your heart's about to jump out of your mouth. Has it calmed down since the
Yeah.
quote unquote crux of the round?
I think it definitely like I think I proved to myself a little bit of like, I felt the nerves and I missed the putt. And I think more than anything, like running that longer putt a hole after was more like me looking myself in the eye
Hmm.
than me looking at Kristen or any of my competitors. That was me like, can you do this? Can you wrap it up and forget about that bogey and keep making putts and
Hmm.
keep executing and keep making drives? And so that was like a little conversation with myself of like,
Okay.
oh no, I'm not sure if I can do this. Are you sure? Because if you could, it would be super awesome. And I feel like you kind of sort of can.
Was that conversation happening actually out loud with yourself, or was that internal dialogue?
Definitely internal. Sometimes I can have the external dialogue, but my dialogue isn't always other people's responsibility.
Of course.
And not everybody like reacts to somebody who has an outward dialogue,
Hmm.
but as a gentleman's sport, I always try to be, as least impactful as I can be to the
For
card
sure.
around me.
Most definitely.
Wait, I want to make sure this is the correct hole.
13.
Yes, I aced this hole in practice.
With what kind of shot?
It was a gold line ballista straight down the middle with a backhand.
Yikes, that is
Absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess that could have been, I could have taken that as a sign of like, this might be your weekend.
So then, was it an air shot, skip shot? Like, did you blast it past the basket? What kind of shot?
it
What like?
it was so perfect. I threw an understable high speed and it turned over to the right side of the fairway. And then just as it was slowing down, the disc was fading perfectly. Like I felt like a person could have caught it. It was coming in so beautifully to the basket and I was alone. There was no
Of
one
course,
near me.
doesn't exist.
No, Pixar, it didn't happen.
I call that playing catch with a baby, just when the speed is so perfect. I
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Same disc? Did you throw the same disc here?
I didn't. The conditions were when I was playing in practice, it was so still you could drop a feather and it would fall
Mm-hmm.
straight down. But as you can see, it's a little bit windier and just kind of a little bit rougher. This was
Mm-hmm.
a huge birdie.
Huge
That was
birdie.
a really, really big putt.
Just
And
another dead center.
yeah, and still, like, still shaking off that four.
Wow.
Still shaking it off. Yes, literally those, maybe not like intellectually like thinking about the missed putt, but the emotions,
Mm-hmm.
like my heart was still up in, my throat a little bit as definitely calming down and finding a little bit more chill, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no way you're going to get to 55 beats per minute out here.
No. Absolutely not. Have you ever had it where you can't feel your hands when you get so nervous or full of adrenaline?
Mm, only when it's cold.
Mm.
My hands usually shake. I know some
Oh,
people that when they get nervous, they can deal with like circulatory issues or they like constrict. But I probably have the palm sweatiness where I dilate a little bit.
interesting. I have never had shaky hands. I've had numb hands. I actually don't know what is worse.
Dude, shaky hands sucks. I mean, numb hands is probably, especially if you're a spin putter, that's probably terrible. But shaky hands is so lame.
That's a good way to put
And
it.
it's like when you're playing poker too. It's like a tell when your
Yeah,
hand when
yeah,
you hold your putter out to aim your shot and it's like shaking.
yeah. Everyone knows how you're feeling. Yeah,
I always respect and admire when I see that in other players though. When
like the
I
emotion.
look at a player execute a shot and then when they go to fist bump me and their hand is shaking after they made the putt, I'm like you conquered something internally
Hmm.
there. This hole was super interesting too, and I think that putt gave me a little bit of confidence. And I really, really, really wanted to scooch this
Wow.
up to the basket and gave it just a little too much juice. I think I came up short on that same approach.
Hmm.
So my whole execution was really good. Like on the same holes, my shots were landing in really similar areas.
This line is
And so
perfect.
oh my gosh, yes, my zero hard mace. Absolutely love that disc.
We got to flat at the perfect spot. I mean, just a little bit too
The
much
look
speed,
on
like
my
you said.
face though, oh, it doesn't look like I was clapping for somebody else's throw. That wasn't for me. But I was very nervous when I saw it hit the ground and then it didn't stop at the basket.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no!" Because
Now
like,
I have to putt.
yeah, well, because the last thing I wanted was like bogey, birdie, bogey. I didn't want to do the up and downs. I
Hmm.
really wanted to like just try and stay steady and try and stay smooth. So
Hmm.
I was like, this was super crucial. At least in my mind, I really, really wanted to get the three on this one. In that moment, I was
Yeah.
I was like feeling some motivation, a little bit of fear, just a tiny little bit, and then a little bit of motivation from making that last putt and like kind of conquering my fears after missing one earlier on the round. I
Automatic.
love it. And the
Yeah.
the putt was super duper solid. One thing I when I putt, a mistake that I always like, not that I always look for, but a mistake that I can find consistently is I'll lean forward and I will take away
Mm.
power from my putt by letting my face, get above my center line. And
Hmm.
so when I saw that putt there, not only did that mean so much to me, and it was like super crucial, I looked like I was standing really strong. And,
I
and it was awesome to see myself in that way.
I said the same thing on the broadcast that it looked like just your posture and center of balance in general looked super good on the putt. I wasn't sure if that was something that you actively had to keep steady or if that's just naturally where you stand.
It isn't naturally where I stand, and I think that is definitely something that I've had to like work on my mechanics a little bit. If I look back at pictures of me as like an amateur playing an advanced, like oh I wish I could demonstrate, but you'll just see my plant, my right foot, my
Hmm.
head is so much further forward than my plant foot. And if you just kind of apply a little bit of physics to that, every bit of like my body weight that is beyond that center point is momentum not being carried into my putt.
Hmm.
So when I can stand like firm and when I can stand a little bit more structured,
Hmm.
I feel like it makes longer putts. It makes those 35 footers a
Hmm.
little bit more achievable just because I feel like I get a little bit more pop out of them when I'm able to hit the
Yeah.
ball.
Like a little less arm, a little bit more legs. Your wrist doesn't have to work as hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really try to I really what's so good phrasing? I try to like bar my spine. So
Hmm.
I really try to engage like my sacrum and my glutes in a strong way, and then I try to engage my sternum and my rib cage in a strong way. So
I
the top
see.
of the chain and the bottom of the chain are as as strong as they possibly can be.
I see.
Definitely showing some frustration. I feel like I noticed it during the round, and I definitely thought like it was tough because it was like I could it was my day, you know?
Hmm.
And when it's when it's your day, it is your day and it's nobody else's. So when
Hmm.
you look at everybody else who is having those putting struggles, or like Holland having, some of those missed putts that deep in her heart she was, you know, fighting as much as
Of
she
course.
possibly could for. So I think it was almost, maybe it was a little bit of catharsis. Maybe it was a little bit cathartic seeing such an incredible player. It was cathartic beating my hero. To see someone like, is that a show of like my self-confidence too? As
Hmm.
I wasn't thinking, oh, I won this. I was thinking, oh, maybe she could have like played better,
Yeah, but
it's
that's how it
interesting.
works.
It
We're
is, but
Yeah,
interesting to like observe some of my thought processes a little bit as
for
I
sure.
as I went through it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when she makes a mistake, especially last season. It always looked out of the ordinary, but then it's like an unfair standard to set for her because she does make mistakes.
Exactly.
She is human, but there are stretches where you're like, I followed around pretty much all season, and there were rounds where I counted maybe one or two micro mistakes, and then the rest was like flawless golf. So you get used to her playing like that, and it's so unfair.
Yeah, I mean, she is a remarkable athlete, but one of the things that I think that I admire so much about her and I think sets her apart is her resiliency.
Yeah.
And I think you've said it, multiple times, is we will see her having putting lows and we will see her having these errors because she's just a normal disc golfer, just like the rest of us. She's a mom and she plays disc golf, but her resiliency and fortitude
Hmm.
in those times of, challenge, it's so admirable.
It's pretty much what this whole game is about. Like you're not going to have perfect conditions. Like what do you do when things are not going your way? What happens when adversity strikes? What happens when you have to get surgery? So many little things that she's fought through. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, she didn't play her best golf, but that's what happens when you don't win. Like, right? Like,
Right?
yeah.
When you're not taking a first place, that means you're not playing the best you
Yeah.
can. And I think that was really it was kind and valuable for you to state too, of it being an unfair, standard that maybe
Yeah.
some of us can put on her. And I mean, of course it is, it's a standard she has set in being such a consistent and
Hmm.
skilled player, but I think we forget, because she's so skilled and so
Hmm.
consistent. Oh, we just need to take a pause because that was enormous.
Yeah,
That
talk about
approach
that
right
shot.
there.
That was amazing. So much trust.
Yes, I was terrified. Like I was not certain that I was going to be able to execute that throw.
Hmm.
I in like, talking about my confidence and stuff like that, and feeling so, sure of my skills in that shot, straddled out, looking at the tall weeds, looking at the line, looking at this small area that I had to land it. The wind had turned up and was
Mm.
like ripping a little bit more. Like everything was like trying to razz me. It's like nature was trying to razz me. Like, oh, can you do it? And yeah, that was another, internally, that was another really huge like shift for me. Being able to make that recovery shot. I think that was the moment where I felt like I won.
I mean, that was, in my opinion, one of the best short approach shots that we saw all season. You have to step backwards and then throw hyzer against your body weight over the out of
Yeah.
bounds.
And that's where that integrity, that like strength in my upper body was
Yeah.
super duper crucial. You have to be, confident in your body positioning. Now this is hilarious. I I've told this story many, many, many times. I think there was a cut scene of me like looking at my phone,
Yeah.
handful of holes back, and that was me checking scores just to see what I needed to do on this hole. Oh my gosh. what the heck,
I
dude?
couldn't believe it. I was like, she didn't need to do that.
No,
I'm envisioning you hitting
absolutely
the
didn't.
top band and rolling to like a terrible distance. I was like, how? It was amazing. Truly amazing.
So when I looked at scores, I think it was indicative of how nervous I really was. Is when I looked at scores, I think I was looking at round total, not overall total. So I somehow in my brain, I thought she had caught up. I thought she had
Wow.
caught up, and then she was closer to the pin than I was. So I thought that she could have birdied that to push. And I was like, oh no,
Oh
no,
no.
if you give her an inch, she will take a mile.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was like complete anxiety.
Yeah. What did she say to you after you hit that putt? I know you guys kind of exchanged pleasantries. What did she say?
She said, congratulations, you did so good.
Oh, that
You
must
did
feel amazing.
so good. She was just like super supportive and like seemed like she was kind of proud of me. She
Hmm.
saw what I overcame too. I when you see her win, you see what she overcomes.
Of course.
And so I think she, player to player, I think she recognized that I overcame some mental struggles there, and that's
Yeah.
bigger than that trophy will ever be.
Well, my question for you is, I know you've done a million podcasts, a million interviews after you won that tournament because it was such a cool moment. Did you ever watch the footage back? Is this the first time watching that final round back?
I think I want to say my dad and I watched it together because he was super excited and he
Hmm.
wanted to like
Of
go back
course.
and watch it. But I think that was like a long time ago, and I don't even. I'm still processing, what that means for a 27-year-old me. you know,
Hmm.
it's pretty crazy how that's gonna be that's gonna be a timestamp
Yeah.
like in my entire life. It's pretty crazy.
Well, Sai, again, thank you so much for your storytelling and your insights and your time today. And again, congratulations. I mean, what an incredible moment we got to relive. Any words for the people at home? What do you have going on in your life right now? What do you have to say for them?
Oh man, well, one thing I wanted to say, is after every round when I'm out, I always make a total effort to stay as long as I possibly can to like sign autographs and like hang out with people. And I am not super duper active on social media. So sometimes when I go on social media and I'm like, ooh, what are my followers doing? I am constantly blown away at like the overwhelming influx of like comments, followers, people tagging me in like the pictures that they took of like us together when we got the autograph
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And it really blows my mind how it's the engagement that I'm getting in person with each of you is resulting in the following on my social media, not anything I'm doing on social media. And guys, like, that's so cool. That is so cool for me. As someone who doesn't really like social media, like, I would rather you go outside and play a round of disc golf than comment on one of my posts or, like, be on Instagram for any reason.
Hmm.
So thank you so much for that, and keep tagging me in posts. That is a really awesome thing for me to look forward to when I open Instagram instead of doing the doom scrolling. So tag me. I love commenting and I love to see what you guys are doing outside in nature, not on Instagram.
Well, Sai, fantastic. Thank you again so much for your time. That is going to do it, folks, today for the Winner's Circle. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.